The process is that we're gonna open a public meeting, and then we're gonna revert to our normal process, which most of you will exit at that particular point when we conclude the public hearing. So I'm gonna make a motion, we open the public hearing. Second, all in favor? Yes? Okay. We're gonna have some background information that Kate is gonna go through. We'll describe the documentation and the steps that we took before the opening, before we call for this public meeting. So Kate, please.
Okay. So I'm going to read the public hearing notice that was posted in the Conway Daily Sun website, town, upper and lower levels of the town hall, and Madison and Silver Lake Post Office. Madison is posted on February 9th. Madison Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing in accordance with RSA 36A to discuss and receive input from the public on the expenditure of funds for a conservation easement of what is known as the chain of ponds. The hearing will be held at 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, March 7, 2024 at the Madison Town Hall, 1923 Village Road, Madison, New Hampshire, lower level meeting room. If anybody's interested, there are documents up here. There is a agenda, and there's also the funding letter, which I'm going to read to everybody now, which has also been posted on the website, but I'll read it. Funding the conservation of Chain of Ponds Conservation Easement. Upper Saco Valley Land Trust and their acquisition partner, the Conservation Fund, have consummated a purchase and sale agreement to acquire the Chain of Ponds property. The Madison Conservation Commission is supporting the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust in its purchase and funding of the Chain of Ponds for conservation purposes. Simultaneous with the purchase of the property by USVLT, completion of the transaction, the town will be granted a conservation easement to ensure the land is conserved in perpetuity and a financial investment in the project by the town is protected. The Chain of Ponds easement will represent the most significant event ever in the history of MCC. The conservation easement will protect an important 625-acre property from commercial development. The easement will provide for preservation of the groundwater resources, protection of water quality, secures public access to outdoor activities, provides for sustainable forestry operations, preservation of wildlife populations, and opens access to scenic enjoyment to the general public. The easement will be a significant benefit in preserving the water quality of Silver Lake. USVLT is in the process of fundraising for the acquisition of the property and related expenses. As part of the effort of USVLT, it has requested that $213,000 be allocated from the town of Madison's land use change tax account to support the project. The projected closing is November 2024. The conservation easement cost will involve a payment of $213,000 by the town from the conservation land use change tax account. The payment represents the town's investment in the project, and in return for this investment, USVLT will grant a conservation easement to the town of Madison, which will be applied toward the purchase price. To clearly show that the investment by the town would meet or exceed the value of the conservation easement, an appraisal was conducted to determine the value of the conservation easement. The appraisal was delivered in November 2023 and set the value of the conservation easement at $455,000. The appraised value of the conservation easement is based on the diminishment in value from the highest and best use of the property. At the time of closing of the purchase, currently set for November 2024, but subject to change based on fundraising timelines and landowner negotiations of the property by USVLT, the town will release the requested funding in exchange for the completed and fully executed conservation easement. The $213,000 payment will not involve any increase in taxes. So after that is done, I'm going to read a section from RSA 36A, Conservation Commission's Section 36-A-4 powers. Said commission may acquire in the name of the city or town, subject to the approval of the local governing body, which is the selectmen, by purchase the fee in such land or water rights within the boundaries of the municipality or any lesser interest, development right, easement, covenant, or other contractual right, including conveyances, conditions, limitations, or reversions as may be necessary to acquire, maintain, improve, protect, or limit the future use of or otherwise conserve the property, utilize open spaces and other land and water areas within their city or town, and shall manage and control the same, but the city or town or commission shall not have the right to condemn property for these purposes. So basically, after this public hearing, the Conservation Commission would go into the select board with a history of what's going on in this whole project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that outlines the state of events here. I believe we have a handout which covers
Right there. Yep, right here.
what you just read about the description of the transaction. Before we open it up for public comments, I'd like to make a few introductory comments. Primarily, it's almost done with the handout that is available to you, but I'd like to have Mike and Doug perhaps talk about the geography of the property. So would you please make comments on that?
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna kick things off, Doug, or?
Sure, go ahead.
All right,
We'll
great.
tag team.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Moran, for Sauk Valley Land Trust. Been helping to shepherd this project along since late May of 2023, when this Sally Nicky, the Conservation Fund, they reached out to let us know that she had been successfully working with the landowners to broker a agreement around the purchase and sale of this property. As Ralph mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the attributes of the acreage that we're looking to conserve through this acquisition. As noted in the overview, this is a 625 acre parcel, making that's comprised of these various tax lots that are defined in green and red on each of these maps. I think related to the groundwater resources that were mentioned in that overview, this shaded area here, it's kind of gray on the green, represents what is the mapped aquifer according to the state of New Hampshire. That's about 300 acres within the boundaries of the property, and clearly you can see that that aquifer actually extends outwardly from the boundaries of the property into and down towards Silver Lake, and also northward. A really interesting aspect of this property is that it actually contains headwaters of 2 watersheds. And so right about in this neck of the woods here, we have a kind of a demarcation point where water below this line flows to the south into Silver Lake and the Ossipee River drainage. And to the north, it goes into Pequawket Brook and the Swift River and into the Saco. And eventually, as you all know, they eventually merge in Cornish, Maine. But pretty interesting, I think, that we have two watersheds, or the headwaters of 2 watersheds conserved potentially within this acquisition. There's a pretty remarkable, how many people have been on the property, have walked around Chain of Ponds? Okay, pretty good familiarity. If you haven't been out there, I definitely recommend getting in touch with the Land Trust or going up on your own. I'd be happy to show you around. It's pretty remarkable, especially right now with the leaves down and the snow on the ground. You can see a lot of the eskers that exist on the property. And these eskers primarily exist from the center of the property to the south. This is what's known as a glacial trough valley, in that it is created by glacial action. These eskers are the remnants of ancient riverbeds that flowed underneath the glacier. And that gravel deposit really lends itself to creating a really rich groundwater resource. It filters the water, it's very permeable, and creates a really substantial resource. Within this map here, you can see these kind of different kind of white areas. When you see them up close, you can actually delineate the differences, but these show the various types of wetlands that are contained within the property. There's about 110 acres, give or take, of wetland that was mapped using mapping software. And there's about 4 miles of frontage on surface waters. That would include lakes, ponds, and streams. We don't know for certain, but we're working with the New Hampshire Fish and Game to do a eastern brook trout survey this summer to determine if there's a population of wild brook trout on the property. We have reason to believe there are. We know that the state of New Hampshire stocks Blue Pond annually for brook trout fishing, and we know that the Nature Conservancy, when they conserved their property up here, did a similar survey with the state of New Hampshire and found brook trout populations in the brooks leading out of the Madison Boulder Preserve. Aside from that, it's just a really stunning piece of land if you've all been on it or seen it. And we're really excited about the opportunity to conserve it and really hopeful the town will help us out. It's really important. The town's investment is a really critical component of this project being successful from a financial perspective. So we're really thankful for folks coming out and wanting to learn more about it.
Mike, why don't you comment about how it continues?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. So you can't see it on either of these maps, but there's approximately 1,000 acres of conserved property that adjoins this to be conserved acreage. And if you were to pull out neither of these maps in the room do a good job of showing it, but this green represents other conserved lands, and they extend all the way over to Witten Pond, eventually over to Route 16 and across into Lake Shikorowa and to National Forest. And so this additional acreage will make a 1,700 acre conservation block and create, in essence, a corridor from Silver Lake all the way to the National Forest, which is pretty remarkable. Yeah.
I'm Doug Brunel. I'm the president of the Land Trust, but I'm also a land surveyor, so I've spent some time sort of doing some preliminary stuff. We're just getting a formal survey done, but this was a a preliminary map that was made. I think you can really see the eskers again. Those were actual rivers in the glacier, and they're a bunch of layered deposits that were like you would see deposited in a lake or a river, but they were actually inside the glacier, and so they formed these little ridges that quite remarkable in here. And then it's a lot of all the ponds were kind of in the depths of left there. So that's one of the most striking features. There's another interesting right in here, which is right in the heart of this. This has got a lot of ledge on it, and as opposed to the sandy eskers. And this is quite a remarkable little ridge over here, and similar to often that Forest Pines development area. There's some amazing views off out to the Sandwich Range in Chicago, and then you can even see up the valley too, up into the. Fortunately, you can't see the malls and the strip, but you can see the mountains up that way. So, this has the primary access point is off Forest Pines Road. The owner is actually taking out a little piece of land that is making into lots, kind of there for his family. So that was part of the transaction. So what is going to be left is a corridor road here, and it's in the same place as the current access off Forest Pines Road, and then that will be the main way in. There are also deeded accesses actually through the Madison Shores development on the Davis Pond, and those will be, I would say, less public. Those will probably be. There is a good road that goes in and accesses the north part. I think that will be, mostly used for access if we need for monitoring purposes and other things. So this is kind of where with all the little ponds, I think where most of the interest would be from the public. As everybody probably knows, there is the railroad corridor, the old Boston Main Railroad goes through. That's owned by the state of New Hampshire, and that's an active trail, especially snowmobile trail. So that kind of provides a link. And the other thing I think of interest to the town, we are also going to end up owning this parcel that's called the Davis Pond parcel, which is just about all of it is wetland, and that was a donation by the owner. It was actually coming through the Green Mountain Conservation Group, and they are less interested in owning land than they are in water quality and all of that. So we're going to take over ownership of that too, and these will be. So that will make a connection and help protect again the headwaters of the Pawcatuck Stream. But the town of Madison owns 3 different pieces of land in here already, and as well as the Elaine Connors Wildlife Refuge. There's a preserve that's in here from the Currier family, another one from the Lyman family, and then there's also a little strip in this part that was, again, I think taken for taxes, but it was part of the old, so that makes a direct link up to this other parcel. So again, more conservation of a pretty remarkable series of wetlands in there. I think that's about all I had to say on that, but if there's any
Very much
questions.
appreciated, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So that gives you the background on the property itself, and it's obviously strategic in terms of its environmental value and value to the town. And in effect, when we make our payment for the conservation easements, it will keep the property under conservation in perpetuity. So it's a very valuable proposition for the town. With that, I'd like to have Mike and Doug talk about their progress on the funding of the project.
Yeah, for sure. So, as in any large acquisition project, we're going through a multitude of funding resources to make this project a reality. The town's contribution, or what we hope would be a contribution, is one bucket, but we've successfully secured $250,000 from the Land Community Heritage Investment Program of the state of New Hampshire. We've secured another $260,000 from an anonymous foundation who's also contributing for around $40,000 to this kind of pass-through grant to finalize this acquisition that the Green Mountain Conservation Group is working on. So in total, $300,000 towards kind of the broader conservation of the area. We have a public campaign on our website that's been going for the past couple of months. I urge you all to check it out if you haven't seen it already. We have a great video on there, as well as just information about the property. To date, we've raised $14,700 from community contributions, and we're anticipating that to grow as we kind of get into the warmer months and start doing more direct donor outreach to the community. Thanks to those, if anyone in the room is doing it, thanks for doing that. We have a pending grant from the U.S. Forest Service Community Forest Program that we're hoping to get $400,000 from that grant. Sally assisted with that grant writing process, and we've heard really good feedback, initial review from that grant maker. So we're cautiously optimistic that grant will come through, and that would be pretty significant, as you can imagine, from the overall fundraising standpoint. Aside from that, New Hampshire Fish and Game is considering contributing $30,000 from their fish habitat account. That will depend upon the surveys that are conducted this summer. In total, the acquisition price tag is around $1.1 million. With due diligence, there's a survey required, which is a significant expense, but our grant makers require that to make sure our legal parcels and the bounds are marked. And we are total projects around 1.3, with $200,000 being set aside for initial just management, anticipating having to monitor and improve future improvements, hopefully, for public access to sustain the site. And also, as a land trust, tasked with monitoring and managing the property in perpetuity. Whenever we acquire land, we have what we call a contribution to our stewardship endowment. And so we put $100,000 into our endowment, which would spin off interest to help fund our work in conserving and managing this property in perpetuity. And so $1.3 million is our approximate price tag for what we're trying to acquire this property for, with all management costs covered as well.
Okay, with that, I'd like to get your comments. I'd like to state a couple of ground rules. One being, one person speaks at once. So we don't have a huge conversation going on at the same time. And also, that one person is free to talk with no interruptions. So to speak, you need to be recognized. So you have to say, I have to recognize one of you out of this massive population here. And please state your name for Kate so she can attribute your comments properly in the minutes. If you have a question, please direct it to me as opposed to anybody around, and I'll direct it to the appropriate person. With that, I open it up for your comments. Any comments from anybody? All right. Okay, I got.
Dave Kirby, Heritage Road. So I've used this property for probably getting close to 30 years now. I have some concern with what's going to happen with the property and how it's going to be allowed to be used going forward. I've used snowmobiles, four-wheelers, hiked, hunted. I've done just about anything you can possibly do with a piece of property on this piece of property. I think it's a great idea to conserve this. However, I question how much conservation is needed for this property. I happen to sit on the planning board, for anyone who doesn't know. I know what is allowed and what is not allowed. This property, to actually be able to develop it, is very, very limited due to the number of wetlands and due to the number of access points. There would only be a possibility of about 1,000 feet of road to be built on this property, and the requirements would be very, very, very stringent. I'm definitely concerned with the availability for people in town to use it for all of the things that I've used it for in the past, and I hope that we can all continue to use it the way we've used it in the past. The other concern I have is that the access to this property currently crosses a rail crossing that is not a rail crossing that was ever approved by the state of New Hampshire. So that is another concern that I have, is that that property crossing is technically not allowed. Obviously, as I think anyone who's used the property knows, it's been accessed for logging and everything else for years and years and years. However, I don't believe that it is actually a lawful access to the rest of the property from the Forest Pines Road side. That would be something that would need to be looked into. But my number one concern is availability of access for everyone who has used it for a long time. And there's always been an agreement for people who live on the Madison Shores development that to gain access to doing the logging from that end was that the people of Madison Shores were allowed to recreate with motorized vehicles as well as on foot to allow that access into that property for logging purposes. So I just would be curious to find out what those plans might be.
Okay, what you're talking about is the conservation easement. And we received just recently a draft. That process will go through all of your concerns. And I can tell you that there is a considerable amount of thought that's been put into that draft. And I appreciate the initial first step that they've made with respect to that. But your comments, I think, will be addressed in that conservation easement. So I think you'll be satisfied that your concerns will be taken care of adequately. So I think that's part of the process. Any other comments?
I could just address, the railroad crossing is, yes, is not the ones specified. There are 3 other legal crossings that are totally defunct. So I don't think the state is gonna have a lot of problems with using an access that's been there for quite a while. So, and on the north, there was no real agreement legally. I'm just saying that there was a legal access through there. It's just what will follow will be what will the use of these things be, and I think that's what's open to, you know, we're trying to do things. Obviously there's some fragile things there that probably some things we'll have to modify a little bit because, you know, there's but, you know, especially in the wetlands, but other things I don't think we're gonna have a real problem with the town with, you know, public being able to use it in a reasonable way, so that's, yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Ken Jones. Actually, I bought the property. I fully support what we're doing. I think it would be a shame if we let this go by. This is an opportunity that we only have one chance at, really, and I think it's a good thing for the town, and hopefully we can meet some of this gentleman's needs. But I think it's important for us to preserve this piece of property. It's the water quality really means a lot to all of us, and the wildlife that's in this property, and the use that we can use for the town. So I fully support what we're doing here, and I would hope that we would go through with this project.
Very good, thank you. Mike, you want to comment on a potential gravel extraction?
Yeah, so that's the one, so as we've been looking at this project, the one kind of concern that I think is out there is long-term, the potential for gravel extraction on the property. When we look at the Esker complex and that gravel resource, we look just up the road, we have a very robust gravel extraction operation going on along the same glacial deposit. And just to the west, off of, I don't know the name of the
High
road.
Street.
High Street, there is a kind of a smaller gravel pit right on the boundary there. And so when we think about development, it's not always just houses, right? It's also that potential extractive resource. Frankly, at some level, it's the forestry aspect as well. If you walk around on the property right now, you'll see some pretty heavy-handed logging that happened over the past 20 years. And under ownership of a USVLT with a conservation easement, those sorts of impactful logging practices wouldn't be happening. So definitely hear what you're saying, and I'm happy to talk to you more, because I think we're on the same page in terms of goals around use long-term.
Okay.
Christine Taylor. I live in Madison Shores, there's a few of us here. Our roads are, just so everybody knows about Madison Shores a little bit more, they're dirt roads and they're private roads. I do understand there's an easement for this property, but I think, at least my concern, maybe some other members of Madison Shores, would be the usage of that road where we maintain it, and it's a pretty rough dirt road as is. It's a small community with, and, you know, we look at privacy, security, if you were bringing more people through there on a private road, what would the contribution of the conservation, if you were to open it up for public, what would your contribution to be to maintaining the road? Because you'd be also responsible for helping us maintain our road. I'm fully support of this acquisition, just so everybody does know. And the other piece is, there's, from the loggers, and then I've been part of this property for 50 years, there's some natural paths before the logging. A concern for some of us would be that people would use that as a public access and then enter into on our private properties. So I guess there's concerns about how you publicize that there's an easement on our private roads and how you handle conservation access through private roads.
Well, that's an issue that we'll address, certainly as a result of your comment. And I think the easement draft goes into details with respect to access, so we will focus on that particular issue for sure.
Good, Ed. One more. There is a deeded stipulation in there that we'll inherit that says if there's any damage done to the roads that, you know, for instance, by logging, I don't know what has happened in the past, but there was something in there that says the roads will be repaired and put back to the state they were in, so there is a legal binding thing where we do have to be careful if anything happens that we're responsible from that.
No, I understand that piece, but as an association, we all pay dues towards taking care of the roads, so that's just
Okay.
something to bring forward also. But like I said, there is a concern for how the private roads would end up being more accessed past even that easement
Right.
section.
I'm sure we'll address it. Any other comments? Sir?
I'm Dan Stepanauskas. I've been a forester for a long time. I've been all over this tract, and I don't think you have to worry too much about logging damage, because there isn't much to log. It's been cut pretty hard, but I will say that there are places on that land, considerable acreage that's growing back to a really nice crops of trees, young red oak trees, pine, some spruce and hemlock, and they're growing very densely, as young stands should grow, so they're growing nice, clear, tall trees, just the way you want to see trees grow. So I think that this is long-term, of course, very long-term, but it's going to work out really well for the long-term of that land to maintain it for wildlife habitat. Currently, there is good wildlife habitat, a lot of it wetland habitat. Some of the browse has grown too high for deer, but there still is enough there. And there are mass trees, there are beech, and there are oak, more on the hillsides, less on the flat. The soils are porous, a lot of them are softwood soils, are well suited to growing white pine, hemlock, spruce, and less to high quality trees like sugar maple that are demanding of nutrients. And when Mike said about the conserved lands, those are permanently conserved lands that it's connected to, but there's a huge acreage, as most of you know, of land that doesn't have conservation easements on it are not formally preserved, but the mudlands and all of these large ownerships that are de facto conserved, because those landowners aren't going to do anything to let those lands go. They've been owned for generations, and they will continue to be owned for generations. The Elaine Connors Wildlife Refuge, that will be there for the foreseeable future, that's for certain. Courier, the town land, and all of the land to the north is really going to be there for long term. It's a huge block of habitat for wildlife to travel. They come down from the National Forest, like, as Mike said, across Route 16. You just have to cross Route 16 and you'll get this extension of incredible habitat. Even the World Fellowship, it all connects there. So it's a lot of land, thousands of acres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Sean Bergeron, and Linda and I own the property immediately to the south. We own all the southern half around Mac Pond on both sides, it's the south of Mac Pond. And then we own easterly from Mac Pond over to Forest Pines. I've been intimately familiar with this property since sometime in 1981, and probably have walked much of that property every third day, every year since. I've been very familiar with both landowners, both the Crows who own the property now and Bruce Thomas who owned it previously. And when we first purchased our property back in the early 80s, I would say that I was not a fan of conservation. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I was not a fan of conservation. But what I have seen over the years, particularly on this property since Bruce Thomas sold it, is that the road, for example, that we're talking about using as an access from Forest Pines in. When I first was on Forest Pines in 1981, that road was barely walkable. Most people, many people, didn't even know that Mac Pond existed. Since those times, right now, it's a veritable superhighway. And what I find very frustrating is between myself and Sean Jr., several times, almost every year, we've gone on to Chris's property, and he's allowed us to do so. We go there, it's used frequently as a dump. I don't know how many times we've taken truckloads, and most of the time it's construction debris. So people are probably doing demos. They don't want to pay the tipping fees, or they get to the transfer station, they can't do whatever, and it ends up there. This is just the kind of stuff that's transpired. It used to be a property that was walked on all the time. Now, and no, David, no, I'm not a snowmobiler, but I can tell you the use of mechanized equipment on that property it's unbelievable. Mike, you probably know of it, particularly from your house. It's just, as I said, I used to not be a fan of conservation. And I definitely am biased here in the fact that it abuts my property, and I would enjoy it to be conserved. All that said, when I see the benefits now of the Nature Conservancy properties, the Pine Barrens, and similar properties all around the Mount Washington Valley, and also when I look at what I do for a living, Mr. Kirby's completely correct. Could you develop this property? Sure. You could put a couple houses out there. It's not subdividable land. It's one of these properties, the best thing to do with it is what is being proposed. Hopefully that works.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Okay. Perhaps I could get hands raised as to people that are for this particular project. Okay, I think looks like it's unanimous, and it's about 30 some odd people.
Raise your hand if you're in favor.
Okay.
I'll support.
Support. Okay, well, thank you. All right, so.
$10,000 each.
Yeah, with that, I hope all the people that raise their hands will make a contribution. Okay, so with that, I make a motion that we close the public hearing. Yes. Yes, all in favor, yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you all.
Take like a 3-minute break if they would like to leave.
Okay, well, we're gonna take a break before we start the next meeting.
Hear all the reports and
The other incentive with those guys is like, remind me, I think it's like 6 months.
I think the whole room was happy.
now the real work.
Last weekend.
Last weekend, we were kind of busy. We made 40 gallons of syrup last weekend. Yeah. And I don't know what, I don't think it's rum this week, but it's kind of stayed warm. But next week, is there a day that's better?
Friday, you helping with?
Yeah, generally.
On Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, Saturday, I do it Saturday or Sunday too.
I'll have to look. I have a daughter.
Didn't respond, so I didn't know. And I never
I have a
checked the
daughter
phone
that
number,
plays
so
my
I
phone.
think I had your right phone number.
I'll check, but I have a daughter that plays my phone. So sometimes if you open something and then it.
Might have to get in her own phone.
She has her own.
Sign-in sheet with it.
I'll give you a call.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, Maureen.
One of my schools bill
Oh, okay.
We're gonna be down all week. Can you just hold it for me?
Whoever goes out.
One year back in
Post pictures of 25 fishes.
I'm from Massachusetts and I was on our conservation.
Oh, wow, okay.
Okay, lovely. It's a great spot over there. I've only seen it from this high point here.
How did you get there?
We hiked in off the road, and there's a trail that goes up along this creek here, and then follows the ridge and drops back down. It's a pretty remarkable little side trail. Kind of an unassuming spot. So much land is low. You just one little knob, high land. It's really just
And that's the letter.
10 years ago.
Okay, good.
Somebody had it.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big fancy.
We talked to Doug here, because I think he passed along the brochure.
Yeah, it's full of errors, but we went out and walked it Stuff on this side, stuff on this side. You know, so we did a bucket that, and, you know, we were looking at, we were interested in lots, and they are interested in specs. So, the properties that are going to be
This carves out the portion that's good, what's in source competition will have some sort of. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for your
There was a couple of, there was at least a dozen or more. That came in after the snow melt. And there's no ice in the river, so it's back out. Everybody's been bizarre, so they know. I mean, it's like dark. It's not even that light.
Okay, we can continue on now that the public hearing closed. I'm going to go to old business, and Jill Anderson with her report on the water quality of the Green Mountain. As per-
Thank you.
So we have handouts for you guys. These are just reports for the past year in 2023. And then the more comprehensive report.
That's for sale.
Yeah, so the handouts that you were just given, the water quality report handout is on our website, so I'm happy to send a digital copy if that makes sense.
Yeah, 'cause I don't have.
Yeah.
I don't have it, so I need something to file.
That's why I figured I'd mention, like, I can send you a digital copy, no problem.
That'd be
And
great.
then the lake report for Davis Pond will be going up on our website within the next 2 weeks, so all that data will be available for public consumption. Just have people go to our website to find it. We're gonna start, if that's okay, with the water quality report from the Rivers program, which is the document that says Madison Water Quality Report.
Has our logo on the front.
So I guess before we begin that too, I just want to make a general statement about Green Mountain. We've been working on this Rivers program every year seasonally for 22 seasons. We're kicking off our new season starting on April 29th. And we'll be doing our monitoring from that date until sometime around Columbus Day. And as always, we are very lucky to be the recipients of AmeriCorps members through a federal grant. And so this year's flavor of AmeriCorps members are Haley and Grace. And so they will be serving at our organization until Thanksgiving. And they started in mid-January, and we will also be having 2 new young people that we are in the hiring process right now for. So we'll have 4 AmeriCorps members helping out with these programs, not only for just in Madison, but for all over the Ossipee watershed. So they're here tonight to learn about Conservation Commission meetings. And that was a fun one.
And I'm Grace. I'm the water quality assistant. My name is also on the PowerPoint. So I'm a good contact as well.
So she's the one who puts up with me for most of the summer. So the first couple of pages of the report are just the parameters that we test for with our Rivers program. Just a reminder or a refresher for everyone, this river program is a bi-weekly program, so every other week we're going out and we're doing collection for field parameters, so we're taking measurements of the temperature, the dissolved oxygen, the conductivity levels, which are usually used as a proxy for road salting. And then we are taking a pH value and turbidity, or how clear the water is. And then once a month, we're collecting laboratory samples. And we have 2 different partnerships at UNH to help us to do the laboratory work. So every month, phosphorus is being monitored at those locations. And for the site on Banfield Brook, which is up by the FW Web, that location gets a couple of additional parameters, chloride, potassium, magnesium, nutrients, silica, and a few others I'm sure that I've missed, but the complete list is in your packet. So we monitor 4 locations every year in Madison. And the report kind of just goes in order of how we've had them geographically lined up. So the first site we call GM1, which is the Banfield Brook site up by the FWF. And that's the location where we do all of that more in-depth testing. And that's my site. I monitor that location now because I also live in Madison. So and Ralph, that used to be your site many years ago. And so for our data, this is looking through, for the field data through December of 2023. For the laboratory data, it's through October of 2023. There's usually a little bit of lag on our laboratory samples because we do get a donation, in-kind donation from UNH to process these, so the data are always a little bit behind. But for GM1, in terms of your turbidity and pH and total phosphorus, those levels remain pretty stable, not only in 2023, but we look back at the previous 5 years to see how the current data looks to the past data. And in terms of those 3 parameters, it was pretty consistent and stable throughout the last 6 years. The next page that you have that has 2 different graphs on it. The graph to your left is dissolved oxygen, which has an inverse relationship to temperature. And so in ideal conditions, you would have, as your temperature increases, your dissolved oxygen decreases and vice versa. So you want to have a nice line, essentially, going through those. So if you remember from your maybe middle school or high school math about R squared values, linear functions, you want to have an R squared value close to 1 because that means that that inverse relationship is proving true. So at that location, we do see a nice high R squared value, which means that any fluctuations in dissolved oxygen are a result of temperature. Conductivity at this location has always been historically high. It does come through the P. Porridge Pond and the Edelweiss District, which may be where we're collecting a lot of that road salt from. And last year, though, given the amount of rain that we had, it's kept those values reasonably low. What we typically see for salt is the amount of salt doesn't necessarily change in a location, it's the amount of water that you have. So in the spring, you have a lot of water, the salt levels are low, but typically if you don't have a summer like we had last summer, it dries up, the salt stays the same, but now it's more concentrated and less amount of water. But again, given just the amount of flooding, I'm sure you all were aware of 113 being washed out, we did see those levels stay relatively low there. Dissolved oxygen is a parameter that is actually monitored by DES, so this is why we have 2 different graphs for it. So there are stipulations in terms of dissolved oxygen for what river location should have. And so they should be between 6 and 12 milligrams and over 75% saturation, which is what we see at Banfield Brook when we monitor there. And then the last page is just all of the different additional parameters that we monitor for. Banfield Brook's 2 parameters that had slightly elevated levels in 2023 were chloride, again, which we've pretty much historically seen at that location from road salting. And then nitrate levels were high there as well, which given, again, the amount of flooding we had, all those nutrients are getting pulled into the river locations, and we saw high nitrogen at almost every location this past year. So it was not a unique to Madison problem, it was a watershed-wide problem. Forest Brook is another one that we do, which is over by Silver Lake Harbor. I also monitor that site, and it has a lot of fun poison ivy I get to hop through every other week. And I'm very allergic to poison ivy, so it's super added fun for me. But there again, looking back not only at 2023, but the previous 5 years, we have relatively stable conditions of turbidity, pH, and phosphorus there as well. The R squared value, you put this in black and white.
Sorry.
It makes it hard to see color when it's in black and white. That's good. Okay, so we did have a little bit of a reduced R squared value at this location. Again, for a lot of our locations in 2023, we did see that because of all of the flooding and the new pulled in nutrients that we had. So it's something that we will obviously continue to monitor in 2024, but it's not anything that I would get super worked up about at this moment in time. Historically at Forest Brook, we do have a good correlation of temperature and dissolved oxygen there. So if we can have a season that's maybe not as rain heavy, I'm hoping that we will see where those levels return to normal. And the same thing here with conductivity levels everywhere. We're pretty squashed down given the amount of rain we had, and we're seeing that same effect at Forest Brook as well. And again, the dissolved oxygen, just because that's a DES parameter and an EPA parameter, that graph is located there, but those levels looked really good all summer as well. Farrenbrook, yes, sorry Mike, go ahead.
I see the one point on the bar graph on the last page. It looks like, how do you get over 100%?
So you can do that if the water is super cold, because cold water will actually hold more oxygen. So if you have a dip during the season where the water is a little bit colder, you might find that you're holding more oxygen. And we actually see that pretty regularly for the sites we monitor in the winter. It's not uncommon for us to see over 100%. Good question though. Cold water holds more oxygen.
Well, usually you can't get more than 100%
Yeah,
of anything.
right.
Right, yeah. It's like it answered bonus questions. So Farrenbrook, so now we're down at King Pine location. That is a site that actually Noreen and her husband Dave monitor for Green Mountain. And here again, looking back at the previous 5 years, the turbidity, the pH, and the phosphorus were pretty stable at that location. Here we also did have a good R² value at that location, so changes in dissolved oxygen were because of temperature. And once again, the conductivity was squashed down due to the just amount of water we had in the watershed last year. And again, you can see the dissolved oxygen saturation graph. And the last location is Millbrook, which is, if you're now on the Purity Springs property, the outlet to Purity Lake. So kind of Purity Springs is on both sides of the street. So as the water comes down past the workout center that they have over there and it's going under the road, the monitoring site is on the other side of the road heading towards Freedom. You flew too fast.
Oh, sorry.
So there too, the turbidity, the pH, and the phosphorus were pretty stable throughout the summer. Good, our squared value here was a little bit skewed. Again, that was not an uncommon thing that we saw across the watershed given the amount of nutrients, and particularly lakes become these holding troughs for nutrients, and as they come out, we tend to see different spikes throughout the season when we're having those flood events. And again, conductivity here was also squashed down for the amount of water. And then again, once more, the dissolved oxygen % concentration graph. So overall, there was a good summary, a good water quality score for the waters in the town of Madison that we survey. And so we usually do our typical plug of working on repairing habitats, reducing road salts will help. We are working on, we did a monitoring of all of your culverts in 2021 and 2022, maybe it was 2020 or 2021. All of those data are available for use if town road crews want to see which were like the top 10 worst culverts in our area. Those data are available. If you need help navigating those data, we're happy to help you. Tara Schroeder, my educational counterpart, is very savvy in that software and is happy to make you a list. And I do think she's curated you a list previously of of the culverts. So we were not granted the FEMA grant last year that we had applied for, so we've reapplied. And so we have to wait now until August to hear back because the government takes forever to do anything. But with any luck, we will be awarded that grant, and then we can start working with the towns to figure out how to fund some of these projects to fix some of these culverts to make us a little more resilient to flood events in the future.
Okay, very good. Appreciate your comments, and we look forward to another good year. Hopefully, we don't have any mishaps like another storm or whatever, but remains to be seen. So, thank you again.
So just before I leave, the other handout I gave you is we did do a sampling of Davis Pond.
Right.
On behalf of Davis Pond, essentially. We went and just did a single sampling. We also not only do tributary monitoring, we do lake monitoring at Green Mountain as well. And so Christine Taylor, who was here, was very kind to let us borrow a rowboat. So we did do a single monitoring session in the beginning of August to see what the water quality of Davis Pond was like. And so that report is in front of you. The biggest thing I can say is this was one data point taken in the summer. A lot of our lakes this summer, due to the flooding, saw higher levels of phosphorus, saw lower levels of dissolved oxygen, and lower levels of water transparency. But I don't know of any currently existing monitoring program for Davis Pond, so I give this to you with the hopes that perhaps some agreement can be made with Davis Pond to just have their water quality be monitored routinely on their lake rather than just a one and done like we did. And they can certainly do it through us, but they can also do it through other entities, and I'm happy to help with that in any way that might be of use.
Very good. Again, thank you. All right. Yes.
One thing, thinking about the culverts, and all of the towns around here this summer ended up replacing some culverts. Have you been able, or can you get that information from the town as to which culverts were replaced so that you can update your kind of list? I would think most of the towns must have some sort of record of what they did.
I'm sure that they did. I started this by saying this is not my main project.
Okay.
I worked on monitoring the culverts, but I wasn't the lead on this. So I can't tell you how changes are made to the database and if changes are made to the database or not. That being said, we identified 450 culverts in our watershed that needed to be replaced that had incredible issues with them of whether they were not aquatic, then a low aquatic organism passage score. They I personally stood in many culverts that were collapsed or breaking or close to breaking, and so I would assume out of 450, a small drop in the bucket were replaced. So it will be a very labor-intensive project to try to get everybody to work on fixing their culverts, but we are dedicated and committed to trying to help as best we can, and the FEMA grant will be the first step in that. But yes, I do see your point. I'm assuming when the towns get there, once we can,
Yep.
that will be taken into consideration. But yeah, a small number of culverts got fixed and that was it.
This was Madison's spreadsheet
Oh,
for
great.
the culverts. So, and I think the DPW was given that so that they had something to reference at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Thanks to
we're-
Tara and me and
Yeah.
a couple others.
And you have that list for all the towns in the watershed?
we did all of the towns in the Ossipee watershed. Fish and Game helped out with like the National Forest. North Country Council did a lot of the like Bartlett, Jackson, Chatham area.
Yep.
So between the three organizations, there is a score for every culvert we could find. There were, I'm sure we missed some because we used mapping to predict where we would think we could see culverts. And sometimes we were out in the field and we'd find some and we would do the monitoring on those that we would find, but
Yeah.
I know, I can firmly say we probably missed some.
Mhm.
We did the best we could. We got 1,200 culverts that we monitored all together. It was a big project. Stood in
Yes,
a
it
lot of
was.
culverts. Learned more about culverts than I ever cared to know.
All right. Very good. Thanks again. Tim, you're next on the agenda.
I wanted to come in. I haven't been able to make it. The meetings time's getting switched to the afternoon, just doesn't work for me in terms of what I've got going with my wife and I's families. But anyway, I wanted to bring in the proposed forest maintenance budget for the summer. And also just kind of touch base with you about the easement on Chain of Ponds and talk. I have quite a bit of experience from both ends. Both working for land trusts that hold easements and doing monitoring, as well as being active in other land trusts and holding easements. So as you guys are drafting this, I'm happy to kind of work with you or, give my input as to what's going on with
Very much appreciated. Where we stand on the easement is that they have provided a draft, and it's a good effort.
However, we have decided to not really do a lot of work on it until the project is definitized that it's gonna happen. So in other words, we're not gonna engage an attorney or whatever until a point in time where we know the project is a go. They have pulled together something like, well, it's around 700,000 with our 200,000 in it. And the acquisition is 750, which brings them very close to just buying the property. However, there are a series of other costs associated with it that bring it up to 1.2 million. So the gap now is, they're less than their halfway point, or just at the halfway point in terms of what they really need. So that's really the issue, is that we don't know for sure whether or not the project will really happen. Now, I'm optimistic. I think it will. However, I believe they have to renegotiate the deal if they don't do it by the end of this year. So the purchase option or whatever is available to them up until a certain point in time, and then it lapses. So they have to beaver away to achieve their goals. Now, whether or not they compromise their position and say, look, okay, we've acquired enough money to do certain things like the survey and those kinds of things, and whether or not they'll execute the transaction. But we will have enough notice to be able to beaver away on the easement. So it's a matter of making that determination when we pull the plug on moving forward in terms of hiring a lawyer and all of that. From my view of the conservation easement, it appears that it's a collection of easements that they've made before. So it's not as if they're babe in the woods, that they haven't done this before. It appears that they've done it numerous times. There are things in there that them being the landowner gives them substantial amount of discretion, which I really have some issues on. So it's a matter of, I don't want to jump the gun and get wired up about all these things that potentially are there that may be a non-event anyway. So in due course, we will be pursuing the easement, and I appreciate your offer in terms of, and certainly will involve you in it. It's very meaningful that you're able to do that.
Would it make sense to share the copy of the draft that we have, make sure Tim has that?
I did get it from Upper Saco.
Okay, so you can just at
Take
least
a look at it.
read
Right.
through at your leisure.
Yep. So if that's not on the front burner, then I guess I would just hand out kind of this year's proposed forestry maintenance budget, much of which is the same as years past. There's a couple newer items on it as a result of some of the stuff we did last year, but so the items that are the same every year would be the mowing and the trail maintenance. The mowing of the woods, roads, and landings at Goodwin Burke, and the mowing of the field at Wold Lot that we did last year, and then the trail maintenance on Goodwin Burke and Wold. New item, well, and I suppose the other thing that was on there last year was the monitoring of properties and easements. We did the a la carte fashion. I put the same amount of money in for this year. And so I guess really the only new thing would be the Barclay lot, which was one of the lots that we did monitor last year. The boundaries need to be painted on that. They don't really exist. There is a survey. I found the corners. I found some scattered old evidence, but it's pretty easy to miss it. So that was a new item, $225 for that. And in terms of the monitoring, I included an asterisk and said, think about marking, flagging the McNair easement lines on Durgan Farm and Stacy Mountain, which when we monitored that last year, the easement boundaries don't really exist on the ground per se. Maybe with a lot more looking we could find them, but I would suggest if there's not enough evidence to paint them, to at least flag the lines so that they're in, and then every 4 or 5 years before the flagging falls down, just run through and do it again. But we have the maps from the 70s that established the easement lines, and I did find, you know, here and there a little bit of evidence, but it's not like it's apparent where the easement lines are. So, and that's not a decision that would need to be made today by any means, but it was just something to kind of throw that out there to think about, maybe including that in this year's kind of easement and monitoring endeavors.
Okay. What do we put in our budget for today? All right.
Well, the warrant articles for 10,000 that we are withdrawing, or asking the town for us to be able to withdraw from the forest account for such matters.
All right, so make a motion, we accept the budget?
I got a question I've got there, Tim. I've more or less adopted the ward parcel to behind here. I walk it in the springtime and pick up debris, move stuff, and get a neighbor and go in and use a chainsaw to cut, blow down and stuff like that. If we weren't doing that, would that be something you would be doing? Because I've never seen other parcels that we, other conservation properties mentioned. Usually it's the Goodwin Burke that seems to get.
That's only because those are the ones that you guys have asked me to do in the past, so I just keep
okay.
assuming that,
All right.
That's what we've done. I'm happy to do whatever you ask, but
No.
just, we've been doing those for years, and so I just,
Yeah, for
Put 'em in
budgeting
each
purposes,
year.
we do several. We don't do the whole
Yeah, okay. Guess I'm saving the time
amount
some money.
of properties that are involved in.
yeah, like I said, this is just me putting together kind of
Yeah.
what we've done in years past, but if you have other things you want me to do,
Oh, I'm
I'm
just
happy
curious
to.
that,
Okay,
thank you.
made a motion, I guess you seconded indirectly.
Thanks, Mark.
And, all right.
Oh, sorry.
For Ted.
Ted, good second.
Okay. Any comments or any, okay,
I would suggest we go forward and have him put on his schedule to mark and flag those lines on McNair. Just give him the time to plan his schedule out.
okay.
And I guess the thing we would just need to figure out is what properties beyond that do you want to use that $1,200 for?
Well, why don't you make a recommendation? You
Well, I
make-
tell you what, why don't I get those easement boundaries flagged? We'll see how intensive of a project that is and how much money is left over within that budget amount.
Okay.
Because some of them are pretty remote. I'm not gonna know till I'm out in the middle of nowhere whether there's anything to find and how much time I'm spending looking for it, so.
Okay.
So what was the total? I mean, could we add 1,000 to say up to, and add 1,000 to it
Well,
since
the
we know?
budget, the budget was
$4,025.
4,000.
Oh, okay.
So it's 4,025. So
That includes the line item of 1,200 in the, we're gonna call it monitoring.
Right.
Right.
But that would also be the flagging, so,
all right.
yeah.
And is that easement line internal to the Lawthorne?
Yeah.
And is that the Fadden Whitaker lot?
Nope, this is the other ones, the ones up on the other side of the road, the other side of Lead Mine Road, running up towards, I guess, what is that, Granite Road is the little one that cuts in there?
Yep.
So that would be the Durgan Pond one, and then the Stacy Mountain one is an interior line. It's just kinda in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, you walk into it and you're into conservation and out of it before you know it.
Yeah. So it would be good to get those lines, if I can't find enough evidence to paint them, to at least flag them heavily, and then, you know, it would be easy enough that once there's a pile of flag, it just every once in a while refresh it.
All right, I'm again making a motion to approve a budget of $4,025 for site work by Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good, thank you.
And in terms of meetings going forward, once summer hits and the school year's passed, I can make this time. But if you have something that's coming up, if you give me, you know, a little bit of heads up, I can arrange, like I did for today, someone else to get my daughter from practice, so.
All right.
All right?
Okay, thank you.
Very good. We'll see you all.
Okay. So some of the items under old business we've covered already, chain of ponds update, the conservation easement deed revisions, I made a comment on that. Property review commitments, any update from?
Almost done.
Okay.
I told Kate I'd email it to her.
We're not, it's fine.
There's so much going on.
Master plan, it appears we're way ahead of everybody else.
The planning board did meet last night and talked about the master plan, and as we dug into our review of the master plan, realized that it really seemed like more than we could deal with on a committee basis and do a credible job. Kate was kind enough to get a couple alternatives for us to sort of try to map a way out. We are going to hopefully get Jamal
Torres from Conway. He was on Conway's.
to come and meet with us for a nominal fee to discuss the master plan and see which way and how comprehensive we want to do. Because it really hasn't been done in 20 years, and to do a credible, comprehensive job is not a bunch of people the first Wednesday of every month. It's a more, so, you know, we can update the demographics and get other thoughts, but, you know, the thoughts are, you know, everybody's goals are the same now that they were 20 years ago. They like forest land and pretty views and stuff like that, but there's some more contemporary stuff that probably should be thrown in there too.
Okay.
So more to come. It's going to be a couple months.
All right. Well,
But any work that gets done, we certainly will digest.
Section 8, which is ours, I believe is nearly complete. I view it as almost nearly final. I'll make one more version of it, which includes the meeting tonight, so that will be updated in it. And next month we can make a decision as to whether or not, where we want to go with it at this point. Okay? Digitizing town reports, I guess we can deal with that next month.
I talked to Larry Meter at Minuteman. He was in the other day when he brought the annual reports in. And I showed him a book upstairs. And I had him look through it. And he said, I asked him what they could do to kind of move this along. He told me if I sent them a chapter, which I'll pick the hardest chapter in the book, which has all the different plan sizes, if I send it to them, they have a doc team there that could convert it into some kind of a Word doc. They'd send it back to me in that format, and I can play with it to see if we can insert things and see how that works. So I told him I would talk to you first about doing that, just one chapter, just to see if it even works before we even get to a point of asking them how much it would be, just to play with it and see if it actually does work.
Oh, I think it's a good endeavor.
That's what I bragged him when he was walking in with the annual reports. I said, wait a minute. Can you
All
come
right, well,
see me?
great.
So is that a good idea?
Why don't we pursue it?
Want me to ask him
Sure.
to send,
Sure.
I'll send him a
Okay.
chapter and then they'll send it back to me in this format and I'll see how we can insert information into it?
Okay.
Does that work for everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay. My perennial problem is that I skip public comment constantly, every meeting.
Well, you skipped to the public hearing, you skipped everything above that. You
That's
never-
right.
You never called the meeting to order.
Well, we're in order at this point.
So, will you have public comment?
Do you want to make a public comment?
Yes, please. Marcia McKenna, I just want to make you aware that the McNair easement property is now under agreement. So it seems that somebody is going forward on that 218 acres. And so at some point, you may want to revisit the easement and try to approach this new owner, whoever it is, and see if they'd be willing to work with us to, or with you, to maybe strengthen the easement.
Okay.
The other piece I just wanted to say, and I could be totally wrong on this, but my understanding of the conservation fund's part of preserving or conserving the chain of ponds is that they would step in and supplement any gap in funding so that the purchase will go through. That's sort of what they do and how they have approached other large projects, that they have the funds to supplement any fundraising that didn't happen in totality, and then over the years, the fundraising still continues to pay them back. So I don't think you should be looking at this as that it might not go through, but you might want to check with
All right.
Mike Moran on that to be sure that I was right
Well,
in my assessment.
I've had conversations with him,
Oh, have you? Okay.
so he did not indicate that possibility.
Well, you
Okay.
probably have more
Right.
current conversations than I do,
Okay.
but that was my initial understanding, and so.
All right,
clarify
maybe it's
that, that's
so,
great.
but maybe he's holding back until some time where it's appropriate.
Right.
There may be a gap between what they raise and all of that, and maybe he's dealing with the gap
Right.
as opposed to a large number.
Right, because initially when I was talking to Abby King, that was her great joy that the Conservation Fund had agreed to take the
Okay.
process on because they were able to do that for other land conservation
Okay,
efforts.
maybe so. As I said, I'm optimistic.
me too.
May have sounded like I was pessimistic about it, but I'm not. I think they're a good group, and I think they're very active, and I think they've targeted the right people to deal with respect to potential fundraising, so.
Right, it
So I
was
think,
something that we couldn't do on our level.
Correct.
We needed to have a partner like that.
right, yes, yes.
Hi, Donna Vayu. Is it customary, you will forward this public hearing to the selectmen?
Yes.
Is it customary that it goes with or without your recommendation? Is it discussed as a board before you put that forward to the selectmen? I'm not sure of the protocol.
Well, I think we're going to report the outcome of the public hearing, the fact that it happened,
Right.
the fact that I believe it was unanimous in terms of the people that were here for it, and we're gonna propose a recommendation that we move forward on the conservation easement at the appropriate time.
So does this board take a vote on that?
Yes, have a motion
Oh,
that we should do.
okay, we'll make a motion right now.
Motion, yeah.
Have we already voted on this?
I thought we did.
We voted,
I think we did a
we voted, but let's do it again to make sure
We did in a
that,
previous meeting.
let's
but-
make sure that,
Yeah,
all right,
we're on the record.
make a motion that we approve pursuing the conservation easement for the Chain of Ponds property. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who seconded?
I did.
Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you, Ralph.
All right, there we go, so that's that.
And Ted's estimation of the crowd was
40,
45.
yeah, 45 people.
I counted 39, but there were a few that came in after
There were
that.
29 seats in here.
how-
29.
49?
29 seats.
29, I didn't all
I
out.
think that's about 45
Yeah,
with that.
yeah,
So good turnout.
very
Yes.
good, very good.
I really want to talk about STR.
More than the public budget here.
On that vote,
On which vote? This motion motion just now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Forward it. I did not vote. I'm abstaining as I don't have enough information on the easement conditions to say whether I
Well,
agree to move forward or not.
Not enough,
Well-
what was that?
well, you have the draft, Mike.
Enough info on the easement agreement.
Oh, all right. Mike, that's a negotiation that hasn't taken place.
So how can I say to the selectmen that I think we should move forward with this process if I don't even know what plan's gonna be used for?
Okay. All right, selectmen's report.
We have voting next Tuesday. We've got town meeting coming up the following Saturday with a couple of warrant articles on there that involve the commission. One being some funding and the other being the Davis Pond property to be turned from town property to conservation. And the select board has supported those. And I think they will depend on, it's who shows up for town meeting. That's, if you get, depending on the crowd, I think both will pass. So that's, basically we've been crunching the budget and getting ready for town meeting, so.
Mike, are the town reports available yet?
I can get you one, bring it
Upstairs?
down. Yeah, I'll bring one down before you leave, don't leave. I'll leave you one.
Three?
3? Sure.
Three. My neighbors.
Sure.
You're so very accommodating.
Planning board?
Planning board, you pretty much got, we did a boundary line adjustment, but that was pretty much what we're trying to figure out is the master plan, which, and to do it right, you're gonna have to spend some money, but.
Old Home Week, Ted?
I've been in touch with the Wildlife Encounters and Ecology Organization in Barrington, and in your package was one copy of the document that they sent to me. We have a commitment that it'll be $453.40 for the program like we've had for the last several years. And if it's approved tonight, then I can call them and it'll be finalized. And like past years, I'll get a check from Kate in July or before the program, and we pay them that day at the school.
Is it? Yeah, okay.
So,
Can I make a motion that we engage Wildlife Encounters to get this ball
I'll
rolling?
second.
So we can make sure we get on their schedule for the summer.
Mike's
All in
pretty-
favor?
Oh, what?
Mike wants
Or
to.
second,
Oh, okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Which one?
Any opposed, or your comment? What?
I just had a question that were the alternates elevated so that your votes tonight are gonna be, accurate?
Let's see, did we count Ted and Maureen's vote?
We have 6.
You didn't elevate them.
All right, make a motion to elevate the alternates, and, all right, since you're now eligible to vote, would you vote for the Chain of Ponds? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, okay, thank you.
And I just also wanted to say that maybe you wanna have somebody or be prepared to talk to the Davis Pond piece at town meeting, just to explain it to the
Yes.
public.
Okay, and since I omitted the minutes,
Yes.
cycling back to the first line item.
I wasn't gonna let you get away.
Well, so after we do this, can we call the meeting to order? We can't do that either.
can't leave now.
That's right, okay.
Get nothing to adjourn.
All right. So, any comments on the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes
I will
of.
second that.
Yes. All in favor?
All right.
Yes.
Abstain, I was not here, nor did I get a chance to read the minutes.
And reviewing the account balances, you can see modest changes there. There isn't much movement of any account. Conservation land use, we have 214,000 in it. We're committing 213 of it, so that is in effect, a
Leave
little
us
over
a
one
nest
thou,
egg.
little over $1,000 that we can use at our, probably not at our discretion, we have to have a public meeting for $1,000 if we decide to do something.
Might need the legal fee for easement.
Right, so, okay. Let's see, with that, make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Yes.